We are not only close, it's just 3 hours by train to Prague from Leipzig, but we are also close in terms of content. We are interested in language and also close in terms of infrastructures. We are one of the CLARIN centers in Germany, and so I'm very happy to be here and discuss these issues. In order to first give you an idea of what kind of resources we have, I just briefly want to introduce you to our homepage, which is not very stylish, I admit, but we have a number of data, and these are the Wortschatz-Ressourcen for German, basically, but we also have this for other languages, the corpora, for example, and we might also, these are the languages that we have available right now, and maybe we can also look at we don't have Czech. Doch, here we are. So these are some of the words that are presented on a random basis, yeah, but you can also enter particular words. So now we is any of these words of interest to you? Which one? All of them. Yeah. I just take the first one, yeah, and so what you can then see is the word, the total number of occurrences, the frequency class. So the frequency class is low, but the total number of occurrences is high. So this gives you an indication that the Czech resources are fairly big. Then you get the examples, yeah, with the sources, in this case unknown source. In other cases we actually do display the sources where we have crawled the data, yeah. And then what does CLENA mean actually? I don't know, does it have something to do with military or so? No. Yeah? Well, we don't know. Anyway, what you then see are the significant co-occurrences. These are sort of the significance values, the measure of surprise, sort of, and you also see significant left and right neighbors of the words, and in total sort of a co-occurrence graph related to this, which you can then follow up in more details, yeah, and you can actually do this for all the languages, and this is one of the resources we have been talking about for many of the other languages as well, and you might enter words of your own, of course, so not just any of these, but you can actually enter here a word that you want to look up. Now it's Czech, of course, but there are lots of other languages, and Dirk, in fact, has used these. Well, he's been working on these resources, the crawling, and he has also worked on statistics programs for making language comparisons based on that. Yeah, because languages, is, yeah, you all know, are very different, and so you might think of purely statistical measures for typology, for example, linguistic typology. Yeah? What are measures for agglutinating languages? What are measures for isolating languages? Different word orders in languages, and sort of how can we quantify these properties, these typological properties of languages with respect to just a purely statistical approach. This is one of the things I want to show you. The other thing is we also have methods, and so it's not just these data, but also different kinds of methods, and this is related to what we will talk about later with respect. There's all methods are under GNU made public license, and different. There's the toolbox with different sort of methods of how to statistics-based pattern match-based approaches to language processing, etc., and other things, classification of text or cluster of words or whatever. So these are some of the things that we then tend to integrate into the WebLicht tool chain and others, and so these are the two kinds of resources we have just been talking about. Now, with respect to CLARIN, let me, where are we? Yes, here we are. So what we want to talk about is CLARIN and some of the background and some of the details that we have been working on, and look for synergies, whatever we can do together. Now, from my side, I think it's important to sort of, we are computer scientists basically, and I think it's useful to sort of think back how sort of computer science and its applications has evolved during the last 60, 70 years. And if you look at the sort of applications of computer science, then in the 40s up to the 60s it's mainly been scientific calculations, mostly for military purposes. Then in the 70s, people started doing sort of computerizing, digitizing workflows in business. It's the sort of computer science in economics, and some of the big companies that are still around, like SAP, Oracle, and others, they made their fortune by sort of providing databases and applications just for business purposes. It's interesting that at that time, people thought, well, my business case is very unique. We are using typewriters, and we must do this because our customers are expecting this. And by providing databases with applications in economics, for example, for managing addresses or debits or many other things, products, and so the things a company has sold, etc. With sort of managing all these business aspects in one database, customers were in a sense educated. So it was the information technology that helped to introduce new models in business. Nowadays we are all used to this. Most of you are younger anyway, and you cannot really imagine financial transaction or Wall Street nowadays without IT. But 30, 40 years ago, this was not the case. And there was strong resistance against sort of being overtaken by computer science and the models of computer science against what people then considered their business models. Then we had in the 80s the digitization of electronic application. Text processing became fashionable. Up till then was only typewriters. And HTML, the standard generalized markup language, we only know basically the XML, the small version of it, but the HTML at that time, you probably know, yeah, the Goldfarb book. That was a big thing at that time. And rival methods as well, yeah. But again, a certain way of looking at things were established, and the result are basically XML, HTML, World Wide Web, not that old, yeah, sort of started by the end of the 90s, and nowadays it's dominating lots of applications. And I think the very idea of research infrastructures, of course, is closely related to that. Yeah? In the same way as HTML was developed as a way, were physicists at the CERN who were interested in exchanging papers, yeah? And exchanging data, and nowadays sort of many other people in science like linguistics or text mining, whatever, would be interested in sharing data. That's one thing, yeah. So why should we just keep our data, some of what you have just shown? Why should we keep it only to ourselves? Yeah? So other people may want to work with that, and others may want to work with the results of the application. And I think this is an important aspect, yeah, which is not only interesting to people in computer science, but it's also of interest to those in real science. But it may happen in the same way as with economics in the 70s, that the models, the workflows that we are used to in our science may have to change. Yeah? So up till now, linguists, for example, have been working with pencil and paper, looking at language samples and trying to analyze sentences. So this may be a model that's going to change with all the digitization. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind. So basically, we have a change from analog to digital media and processes. Yeah, and this is a mega trend. I mean, we have not only a digitization of writings, we have digitization of music, we have digitization of images, many other things. Yeah? So this allows a fusion of analog workflows with digital media and digitized processes, and so new ways of working with these resources. So in the end, basically, we have we have new ways of working, yeah, even in the sciences. And I think this is important to keep in mind when we talk about research infrastructures, because these infrastructures are not only providing data and tools, yeah, but the whole thing will only work if we also change our workflows, yeah, our ways of working with these data and working together. I think this is an important point. So just as a sort of introduction, and we want to talk about CLARIN and key technological components, and basically, unfortunately, this is in German because I copied it in. The thing is, there is a workflow of information infrastructures in science, and basically we have repositories, and sort of you can think of it as a circle. Yeah. So first you have some ideas, then you collect the data, then you analyze these data, maybe you file some patents, you publish things in books, and you also make use of it in teaching, and this again incites people to have new ideas, and then the whole process starts again. So this is how things should be. And but in many cases, So the interdisciplinary interchange and reuse of data, tools, and applications is only limited to small networks. Yeah? So you only have the people who know you, or we know the people who are using our data, our tools. And I think what is important, and this is one of the key ideas behind CLARIN, is that what we need is to switch from random cooperation to a more structured process. Yeah? And again, this not only concerns the technology, it also concerns the organization. And the goal, the long-time goal, of course, is the reuse of data and tools. And in CLARIN, at least in Germany, the idea is that we are creating centers of competency, as it were, as technological and organizational mediators. Yeah, so we have centers here in the south, in Munich, Tübingen, Stuttgart, elsewhere. And so what we do need is, as it were, centers of competence above that, so that we are able to set up small worlds of people, not just only communicating with each other, but also finding more out about resources and tools that are available elsewhere. And this is true not only of Germany, it's also true of Europe as a whole. Yeah, so why not cooperate between Leipzig and Prague? And so if in terms of physical distance, this is much closer than for us to cooperate with people in Saarbrücken or elsewhere. And this is what is meant, yeah, an infrastructure of services that enables everyone to make use of and contribute reusable resources, open science. Yeah? In Germany, as we have just been talking about, there are 9 centers. In Munich, they are doing spoken language. In Tübingen, that's Erhard Hindrichs, who is coordinating the CLARIN. In Stuttgart, it's Jonas Kuhn, and they are doing mainly tools. They don't have data resources. Saarbrücken is Elke Teich. She's doing sort of teaching mainly. IDS, we have been mentioning them before. They're providing data, but not tools. MPI, Peter Württemberg and Dieter van Oeck-Wank, they're providing data for endangered languages and tools, but only for linguistic annotation, basically. Hamburg, they're sort of providing a help desk and teaching. And BBAW is the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences. They're offering this digitized dictionary of German, so they are mainly offering resources. They also have retro-digitized a lot of historical resources, texts, journals, and other things. So they're more oriented towards the past, whereas the IDS is more oriented toward present. And we are offering the tools that I have showed you. Yeah, so we are crawling resources for German. We have collected data for German since the last 20 years, basically. We are also crawling data for other languages, but we are also providing resources because we are basically computer scientists and do tools for language analysis. And from a computer science point of view, that's important because for people not interested in language, they always think, well, we are doing a classifier. Yeah, this is a machine learning algorithm, and once we have the algorithm, we can apply it to all kinds of data. This is wrong. Yeah, I don't think that text mining is just an application of data mining, and in particular, when looking at different kinds of text, different languages, but also text within one language, you will very soon find out that so the media is important. Yeah? So if, text classification for Twitter feeds is something different than text classification for emails. Yeah? Text classification of newspaper news, again, is something different than social media news, etc. And the same holds for sentiment analysis and many other applications. So I think there is a certain materiality of the linguistic resource that needs to be taken into account, and somebody who is not interested in language and somebody who doesn't know about language will have his Waterloo here. Yeah? So for computer science, I think it's important to be aware of the structure of language in order to do better text mining applications. So we do need these resources not only for the humanities, but also for text mining applications within computer science. And as we have been talking about before, yeah, some of the resources that I've shown you, we're actually selling. Yeah, as I was explaining to Jan before, we finance one position in CLARIN just by selling some of these resources. Yeah, there are interesting applications in speech processing, language models, and many other things. But it really has to do with the fact that many companies, even though they are software-oriented, do start noticing that just developing algorithms will not give optimal results. Yeah? So they do need somebody helping them, providing linguistic raw material and fine-tuned resources that take care of the different structures of language. Yeah? The challenges you probably know. These yourself provide access to a huge variety of resources via web services, yeah? Not just download, but sort of web services. So once we have the web services, we need ways of combining them. Yeah? As you have seen, we have some of the tools, but they cannot be combined. Sort of CLARIN provides a tool chain like UEMA in sort of simple direct workflows, and this is the WebLicht. Then, of course, we also need ways of finding resources. Yeah? One thing is to actually collect them and provide them, but we also need to make them accessible to others and make it public that people actually know which resources are available. This is the VLO. Then we need web applications combining the different workflows into local installations. We need safe citations, the PIDs, which is difficult if you are working with dynamic resources like the resources that we are crawling. Yeah, so for example, for WordCharts, we have a new version every 2 years. Yeah, for legal reasons, we are making public only the last 2 years because otherwise people. You can find people on a particular name, and as we have collected data since quite a long while now, yeah, so all of a sudden, as we have just been talking about, it's not just a linguistic resource, it is also a resource on what did people do, yeah? And so we wanted to avoid that and make the resources only available in slices of 2 years. But that also means that, for example, the core occurrences, I have shown you some examples, that the core occurrence for sort of interesting terms may change every 2 years. Yeah? So we need a way of citing this. Yeah? If people think of language just as a static thing, then of course they won't notice this. But we also had discussions with people in particular coming from different political domains that said, oh, well, you have a term here with, and give an explanation in terms of your co-occurrences with which we don't agree. Yeah? But this is only because at this point, for example, certain events have been very prominent, yeah? Whereas others at different times are not. So we need a safe way of replicating data, but also for citing things, so you have co-occurrences per year or per resource, etc. And then, of course, we need different or better ways of dealing with distributed resources and tools in various communities. And now I hand over to you, and Dirk will go into details. Oops. Ha. How much time together? How much time do we have altogether?
Well, we have to leave here at 3 o'clock, but we usually start discussion about 2:30.
Okay. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah. So within CLARIN-D, the Leipzig Center is responsible for the development of the technical infrastructure. So I must warn you, most of my talk will be about these technical aspects, how they enable us to reach the goals CLARIN has. So as we mentioned, it is a web and center-based research infrastructure, yeah, for the social sciences and humanities. And yeah, we want to provide mainly relevant, useful data and tools in an integrated environment, yeah, and all in a scalable way. And yeah, so yeah, we will talk about how we can achieve this. So now I first want to ask you one question. I have two main parts. One is introducing the technical details of CLARIN-D, and one is showing you an example how this all works together in a very simple example how you can work with CLARIN. So you can choose either way which one you want to hear first. Of course, it.
Well, can you manage within half an hour?
Yeah, I think so. So should I give the example first? Then I'll just switch to the web browser. Okay, so within CLARIN-D, we offer our resources in searchable concerning their metadata. So let's say we've got a scientific interest and we want to look, are there certain resources within CLARIN-D which match our requirements? So that all of us can understand it, maybe we want to search some English language resource. What could it be? Maybe simply we choose some other facet here, a genre. Maybe I would like some newspaper. There we've got some resources. What kind of resource types? These are all the different metadata facets which you can search here, and in the end we see we've got just one English newspaper corpus here, and we then can look at all its metadata, and in addition we can also work with this resource, so it's fully integrated into CLARIN-D. We can not only look at the metadata, we can now dive into the resource itself. Let's see.
By the way, as you notice, can you just
Yep.
Yeah, what you see in the page is the Nazi profile.
So
When I was showing you this website, we were just on the normal website. But part of the clarification of work is to make these resources available via the virtual language observatory.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
this is a resource that
Exactly.
otherwise, but this is the more
Exactly. We've got a tool chain to ingest our corpus data into the CLARIN research infrastructure for search of metadata, and then, as I mentioned, you can also dive into the resource and then search within it. So maybe we are just interested in sentences containing the word Prague. And yeah, then we can look at the results here. We can look at the word in context, see more results where this word occurs. And now that we maybe found some resource of interest, we can use this in CLARIN's web application framework. Right here we have to log in. So I will mention this later. This is CLARIN's authentication infrastructure. Here you've got a discovery service where you can choose your home institution. For me it will now be just the CLARIN EU IDP where I can log in with a single sign-on for all the CLARIN services and resources which are password restricted. And now I've got the resource which we searched by the metadata, then chose some parts of it. Now I've got it in this environment where we can simply work with it. Here we've got different tools we can apply to our text. For example, I can choose a tokenizer, which...
Can you increase the...
yeah, I
yeah.
can. Okay. Better?
Yes.
Okay. So then I can maybe do some named entity recognition and also some geolocations. Then I simply run the tools and then it's all applied to the text we just built together. Okay, so it's probably done. Then we can look at the results, for example, here of the tokenization. Let's just download the data and look at the results. So here we've got the text as it was inserted into the tool, and then we've got in XML syntax the different tokens of the text. So all the information we needed, and then how these tokens add up to sentences. So this has all been done. Then we could maybe look at the next one, the named entity recognition. And once again, we have our text, we have the tokens, and now we've also added the for example, locations, persons, dates, and information on named entities, also multi-word units in this case. And we can download this data, we can import it, for example, to our personal workspace, and so on. So this is a very simple example how you can start with some need for a resource. You know you need some kind of text. You can search within the text. You can use the text to apply certain tools to it. And of course, it doesn't end here. You then can once again export the text and use it for further analysis. So, to achieve all this, as mentioned, we are working here in a distributed architecture for achieving this. So we have different requirements to make this possible. For example, we have to add metadata to our data. We have to make this metadata searchable or indexable via OAI PMH in this case, in order to allow to search the metadata of the different centers within this infrastructure. We need to add persistent identifiers to the data to allow you to cite your resources in a safe and persistent way. Within CLARIN, we offer a lot of web applications and web services, and of course, those can also be added to the system. We give out recommendations concerning standards and formats. in order to increase the interoperability. Everything has to be integrated into this AAI to allow you to log in with your home institutional login into all the resources which are in some way restricted. For example, like the Weblicht-Umgebung we just used. Then, of course, we need to offer a search service within the content of the resources. This is our federated content search. And this, of course, also has to be based on a general search interface, so that all the different centers can be searched here in a single interface. And finally, another important aspect are our personal workspaces. Since you want to work with data, you want to store the results or your findings within the different search interfaces. You want to store the results of your of the application of tools, and you want to export all your results, and this can be achieved with the workspaces in this case. So now I will go into the details of a few of these important infrastructural pillars. One is, of course, the metadata infrastructure. And here we choose a component metadata approach. So we don't use a single metadata schema, but rather we allow the coexistence of many of them. We have some kind of explicit semantics for interoperability. And we also can reuse components within this framework so that profiles for describing resources of the same type do not have to be created several times. So how does this all work? We've got a metadata instance which has a header and, of course, more importantly here, the body. This is based on typically on one metadata profile, which then consists of different components. And let's, for example, imagine a profile named interview. This will consist of several components. Maybe one's the general information, which has a title and a creation date. Maybe it has one or several sound recordings with elements like format or length, and maybe an actor who is talking in this recording with his credentials. And as the slide says, explicit semantics, we can link these elements within our components of the metadata to our CLARIN concept registry. Earlier, we used ISOCAT. Now it's called the CLARIN concept registry, and within this concept registry, you've got definitions of the elements you use in your components. So somehow the semantic interoperability is partly solved via this reference to this concept registry. So now all the centers need to have their metadata prepared for the resources and tools they are offering. So in addition, of course, this metadata has to be harvested. Since you saw we've got one central option for search. This is the Virtual Language Observatory, where you can search all the metadata from the different centers. So each center must use the OAI PMH to allow the Virtual Language Observatory to crawl their metadata. And this way we can then offer something like the Virtual Language Observatory, which uses this harvested metadata as a source for allowing people to search the resources. As already mentioned, we need to use persistent identifiers to allow all of you to ensure the stability of scientific citations. And how do we do that? We add a level of indirection as one would say. So we do not directly link to the URL. Instead, we use a handle service, which then links to the URL. So if, for example, the whole repository moves somewhere else, you have to change nothing in your metadata description. This stays the same. It's all handled by the handle server in this case. So this is just for showing how such a identifier looks like. So within CLARIN, of course, you do not only want to have your data, you also want to work with it. So within CLARIN, all the tools are made available as web applications or web services. Those are mainly REST web services, but SOAP is also supported. And yeah, so you can, if you've got a tool you want to include in CLARIN, you typically build such a web application or web service. We just used the Weblicht, which is a web application for annotating linguistic data. It's based on REST, uses the text corpus format, but right now we are also preparing the support for XML TEI input, if you use that. And yeah, within it, as you saw, we can chain our web services we've got in there to do more sophisticated analysis of our data. CLARIN also recommends the use of certain well-established standards and formats. So to make it easier for people who are looking for resources within CLARIN to really use them, so that they are also already in a format which is well supported, so that you do not have to worry about conversion and all this stuff too much. So within the repository, you will offer certain resources, and here you should use certain standards which are specified in certain documents. A very important part of the infrastructure is our AAI, so the infrastructure for authentication and authorization. Since for the user it's typically easiest if you can just, with a single sign-on, log in to all the password-restricted resources within CLARIN, wherever they are situated. You don't want to log in several times, and you don't want to have different logins at different institutions. So in this case, we created some kind of trust domain where the identity providers of the different institutions and the service providers are part of. This way we've got a decentralized user management, and this is also a requirement for all the B centers of CLARIN, so all the resources offered there need to be available this way if they are password protected. So how does it work? I think we just saw that when I logged in. So you want to access some service, some tool or resource at a service provider which is password protected. So the service provider redirects you to the discovery service where you get this list of possible institutions which can be used to log in. There you select your identity provider, for example, your home university, and then you are redirected to this identity provider. You enter your credentials, or your web browser does it for you if you saved your data, and then you are simply redirected to the resource, which then sees that you have been authorized. Looks complicated as seen before. This is quite easy in reality. So we wanted to use the Weblicht environment. We see this little lockdown there because it's restricted. When clicking it, we got to the discovery service where we chose our home institution. We then entered our credentials, And then we were back at Weblicht and were able to use it for our purposes. Yeah. Of course, this is problematic since there are member countries which does not have such a kind of identity federation. Then there are institutions who don't have an identity provider at all. And the most important problem, especially in Germany, most of the identity providers lack certain attributes or all attributes, attributes at all. So for example, the identity provider of Leipzig University only tells somebody that this person exists, not what he does, who he is, just I know that person, he exists. And this is simply not enough for saying, is he a member of the university, is he allowed to access this data? So we cannot make use of the identity provider of Leipzig University. So CLARIN on the EU level created their own identity provider as some kind of fallback system to lock in the CLARIN service providers. Yeah, so somehow this service provider federation is created. You've got the different identity providers which are part of it. You've got the service providers, and once you've logged in with the single login procedure, you can use all the services within this federation. Yeah. This has already been presented in the example as well. The federated content search is CLARIN's search within the data. So you can search for keywords right now. This will be extended in the future. We are working right now on German and European level on adding further layers of metadata to make this searchable. As mentioned, you can now only search on the text level, but within the next time you will be able to search other metadata like part of speech layer and so on, and integrate this into one statement. For example, the word Prague followed by a verb in third person or something like that. Yeah, this federated content search as shown, it's once again a simple interface. It is called the aggregator. Behind this aggregator there are the SRU CQL endpoints of the different universities, but you only see this one aggregator. You can access it via your browser or via your application, and then you can search in the data independent of how many universities or other CLARIN centers are there to be searched. One of the last important infrastructural components are the workspaces. This is some kind of online storage for our users. They can be accessed via a web interface and via a programming API. So you can save your results of the content search. You can then import data into web applications or web services and go on with your processing. And it's all based on own cloud in this case. Yeah. Here just once again to show you how it all works together. Down here you've got your personal workspace. You can search the content of data and export it to own cloud. You can also directly, as we did, export it to the Weblicht environment. Not on the slide, but as we've seen, we first searched our data in the based on the metadata. So in the virtual language observatory, which is also connected to the content search. If we export our data to our personal workspace, we can then export it to Weblicht. The results of the annotation processes in Weblicht can be re-import it into own cloud. And then, of course, further web applications which are integrated into CLARIN can interact with your personal workspace, and you can go on working with your data. So I think this is the most important stuff for now. In addition, I could only show you an addition to the corpora. You have already seen this, that we've integrated some of our corpora already into the CLARIN environment. In addition, we also offer tools like terminology extraction, language identification, base form reduction, text tokenization, topic modeling, spell checking, post tagging, and so on. And this is in beta state right now, so it's not finished yet, but already you can, oh, the session is expired, okay. Then I'll just restart it, use any kind of text, and just, for example, do a base form reduction, choose the English language and execute it here. Of course, you could also import data from your personal workspace, for example, since these tools are integrated into the CLARIN environment. It's just one of the tools we are developing right now in Leipzig, since we've got a lot of tools which are available for download or for use independent of CLARIN. We wanted to integrate it into this environment to make it able for people who are using CLARIN to simply work with our tools here. So yeah, I guess that's it right now. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, the floor is open for discussion, questions, and remarks, and suggestions, and whatsoever. Who will start?
If I'm a user and find some resources in the repository, how will I know which one of them is better than the others? Is there some possibility to comment on the resources from the users, or by the users maybe?
Within the virtual language observatory, there isn't such a thing as a comment function in this case. So it's, of course, also difficult to say when is a resource good, since it's so much dependent on the use case. So we haven't thought about adding something like this feedback functionality yet. Maybe within CLARIN-D there are a lot of, in German we call it fachspezifische Arbeitsgruppen, so it's the working groups which are related to a certain field of humanities or social sciences. So I'm not directly involved into this, so typically they are the ones who give us most of the feedback, what has to be included for them to work with CLARIN in a really useful way. But I don't know if something like that came up there already. Sorry. Thank you.
If I may add to this, I think this would have to be realized in the next stage. Right now we have basically two kinds of user groups. One is linguists who are interested in sort of learning more about language structures, and then or finding out differences, for example, between Twitter and ordinary newspaper text or spoken language, etc., where the media apparently has an influence upon the linguistic structure. That's one thing. The other thing is that we do have user groups, for example, in politics, history, classical languages, etc. And they are mostly interested more in content, using language as a means to doing better analysis in their own field. This is, broadly speaking, the more digital humanities application. And for them, it's quite crucial to find out which of the resources are good for them. So if you select the wrong corpora for doing analysis, for example, in change of political attitudes, based on newspaper text between 1990 and 2000, for example, then if you got the wrong input, your result will, of course, not be representative. And this is a similar problem as empirical social scientists frequently do have when they make, for example, surveys. If you say, well, I'm calling people on the phone, and in order to find out what, for example, the opinion on some critical issues is. If you don't do this in a good way, and you actually have to learn how to do this in a good way, to really get random samples to be broad enough and yet don't phone up too many people, then of course you will have sort of an unrepresentative survey, and all your results will not be scientifically valid. And the same holds for the selection of corpora. So there's one thing where they quite rightly pointed out which one of the resources are good. This very much depends on your purposes, but for the linguists, we definitely should add something like a comment function, because some of the resources are good for finding out good linguistic structures and others. But the hope then is that the more people work with it, the more they will comment on it, and there will be a culture of best practices that helps to say, well, if you want to do this, use these resources, etc. And the ones which are good can be copied, also for other languages. But we're just starting at this. Long answer to a short question. Sorry.
I'm wondering about the federated content search. So I understand that it's beta version, or it's still kind of basic.
Still in development.
Okay, and so I wonder if you have plans to include perhaps some options to query the annotation of...
That's exactly what a big working group is on right now, since most scientists say it's not very useful only to search in the text itself. You need to query the metadata, so the annotation layers especially. So we are working on including several layers. We once again ask the different working groups right now for feedback on what kind of annotations they use. So we can do some kind of prioritization list, which things to include first for the federated content search, and hopefully within some months we will have a working prototype for querying all the different layers of annotation and the text itself at once in one query. So combining the layers into queries. So you can say you want this word followed by a word of certain part of speech and so on, together with a word which translates into this word into English if you've got this annotation and so on.
So eventually this might include also tree banks or parallel corpora?
This may well be. We made a long list of possible annotation layers, and now we are waiting for the feedback of the working groups, and they will tell us what they really use, and we will include as much as possible in the time left for CLARIN.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so first I have just a small question. You mentioned that Hamburg serves as a help desk. So does it mean that it's for the whole network of the CLARIN centers?
Yes.
From technical to linguistic to usage to publication, legal, everything?
Yeah. Basically, they have a three-level support system, and it's quite a number of users of CLARIN already. We are trying to advertise it in Germany in summer schools. The ESU, for example, at Leipzig in the summer is offering 2 weeks of courses on CLARIN and how to use CLARIN. We also have PhD workshops where we want to attract PhD researchers, not just from linguistics, but also from digital humanities, to find out what they can do for their work with CLARIN. So many people call up in Hamburg, and so the first level support is just consultation, what can I do with it, etc., etc. And then people start trying to work with federated content search, and it gives them results that they didn't expect. Yeah, so it may just be that they had a different conception of what the program is actually doing, and this can be taken care of by the people at Hamburg. If it's sort of a general problem of CLARIN, then it's a second level support, which they then pass on to the centers who are responsible for these tools, like VLO is something we are responsible for. Federated content search is something people are responsible, partly in Leipzig, partly in Nijmegen, partly in Tübingen, etc. And then there are sort of, for the third level support, very, very specific problems. But they have a ticket system, yeah, and as in a company, when you call them product doesn't work, yeah, sort of they try to solve problems at best as they can themselves, and if they can't, then they pass it on to the centers, and then the specialists in the third level support. But in general, it works quite all right.
Okay, another small question. Now, every CLARIN center which is certified has to offer deposit services. So do you know how many people, how many groups from outside of the CLARIN network have actually contributed resources, texts, dictionaries, whatever, to any of the CLARIN centers?
No. And this is one thing that is a promise, but hasn't really worked out yet. I mean, we are hosting resources from different people from Leipzig University. One is one that you may know. This is Fandrich, the Gevis corpus, the sort of spoken language in scientific discourse, and we're actually hosting this resource for him. But it's this is one of the things that still needs to be thought out, yeah, because if many people are depositing services, it needs to be archived, etc., then the hard disk space we have available will not be sufficient, and we are thinking of offering these services with our computing center at the university or other places. But this is one thing we still haven't thought about. And I don't know how you do this here in the Czech Republic, but
well, we have a I think it's actually part of the certification that you have to offer this to people. So it's only people who log in, can deposit, so we know who did it, just in case that they deposit something illegal or something. So we know who that is, and they can do it. But my question was rather, is there interest? Because we know that we are running this for more than 2 years, and actually, unless people really come to us and they talk first, that no one has done that yet, like depositing a resource without telling us before and asking questions and so on. So it is possible because anyone who can log in, you can log in because we have the same
structure
service, and you can deposit a resource, and we would just see it as for approval. But people haven't done that. So that was more my question. About that.
Yeah, with 1 or 2 exceptions, nobody has done it either. Again, this is going to be something where I think sort of cloud computing and other things, I think there's a similarity in the scientific community to using these services as, for example, 5 or 10 years ago with using social media. At first you say, well, why should I use social media? Yeah? Why should I use Facebook to link up with my neighbor, etc.? But then all of a sudden, the more people are using it, I think it gains more interest. But right now, people are interested in using the resources that we are offering, but we haven't had sort of results yet where people say, here are my results, please archive it, with 1 or 2 exceptions.
And the last question is, you mentioned when, for example, this depositing service picks up, that you might have trouble, storing all that stuff and servicing. So you are running on your own service, or do you use some computing center, or how?
No. Right now we are using our own services, own hardware, own services, etc. And although CLARIN-D is cooperating with Garching, one of the computing centers, we are not really cooperating with them. So next generation CLARIN.
I have just one very minor question concerning resources. There is one speech person here, but he doesn't speak up. My question would be speech. My question would be how far or how many resources are spoken language, and most of what we have seen are written. But and is there a big demand? I mean.
Yeah, there are, from the centers, at least 2 are spoken language oriented. One is the BUS in Munich, and BUS is Bavarian Archive of Speech, basically. And they only have spoken resources, but they also compute language models for spoken language. They're also selling stuff, in particular different dialects, and they have customers in spoken language, of course, text to speech mainly, and the other center is Hamburg. They also do spoken language, but basically within CLARIN they are responsible for the help desk and similar things. But there's definitely interest in spoken language, and increasingly also PhD students, researchers in spoken language. And I think, say from my point of view, of course we are interested in written language, also for the text mining and semantic analysis. So the main thing we are interested is in now is basically sort of automatic semantic analysis of text with applications in the humanities, but also in technology, mining, marketing, whatever. Yeah, so we are not tied to a particular application, but. So if I'm in the business for quite a while now, and what I notice is that sort of with the improvement of speech recognition and the way that smartphones get more and more accepted with high computing power, basically speech becomes a very interesting and important form of human-computer interaction again, in a way that was dreamt of sort of in the 80s, but wasn't possible to be realized because of speaker-independent speech recognition. And the big companies, Microsoft, of course, and Google Translate, and also the Skype, and so they're working on speech recognition, text-to-speech, and closely related to HCI, human-computer interaction, but also in relation to translation. And this will be the next shift or push in this technology, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't see any hand, and nobody's being out. So I'm only thank you very much for the information. I think that it's nice to see what the other centers in Europe are doing, and I think we can find space for some kind of cooperation across the borders, so to say. As you said, we are very close to each other, so it should not be very difficult. So thank you once more for coming. And
thank you for inviting us.